All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Social Impact and Sustainability Friends. This is the first episode of Venture Forward Together. We are Danielle Doza and Victoria Avi of Venture Forward Strategies based in Cleveland, Ohio.
And we're here sharing stories of friends and colleagues doing good work in this world. We're reaching out to check in with them and see how they're doing during COVID 19 and how this pivotal moment is changing their work and could impact the future.
First, let's introduce ourselves and check in on each other. Victoria, tell us about yourself and what's giving you hope these days.
What's giving me hope these days is all the people learning how to bake bread and how useful of a skill that is. And just a little bit about myself. I was born in Baku, Azerbaijan in the 80s. My family moved to the United States in late 90s, and I have worked in the sustainability field since 2006. A couple of years ago, Danielle and I had a wild idea to start a business together, and we've been working on growing that since 2018. And Danielle can tell you more about that. And Danielle, how are you doing? What's inspiring you these days? What's giving
Yeah,
you hope?
so kind of what's inspiring me, giving me hope are friends and neighbors who are really showing up for each other and supporting each other during this time. I'm from Cleveland and I love living in the city and my neighborhood where I help facilitate a monthly neighborhood gathering to encourage resident-led efforts to improve our neighborhood and the lives of neighbors. I'm also a licensed attorney with experience in nonprofit management, development, and policy. And speaking of bread, I am a bread baker. I've been doing it for about 2.5 years and working on my sourdough recipe during this time, which has been fun. And a couple of years ago, on the recommendation of Victoria, I did the executive program at the Center for Social Impact Strategy at the University of Pennsylvania, a program Victoria finished the year before me. Now we're working together as social impact strategists to help companies and organizations create more value in the world through better social and environmental practices. And this is our first episode of Venture Forward Together. Thanks for starting this journey with us.
And our guest today is Bo Dane. I'm so excited. He's a dear friend, a Clevelander, a waste champion, and a positive force for good energy. I've known Bo since 2006 when I started working at Entrepreneurs for Sustainability, or E4S. And I'll share more about E4S because it will come up a lot with some of our Cleveland guests. E4S was a nonprofit economic development organization whose mission was to create a sustainable economy in Northeast Ohio. Bo, will you please share more about yourself? We want to hear what's inspiring you these days and how you are managing these days with COVID-19, and just share more about your history.
Great, thank you. Well, just want to say thank you to Victoria and Danielle for inviting me to join, and it's a privilege to be here. And I find meaning and purpose in this broad sustainability work. And like Victoria mentioned, I've known her since 2006, and I definitely want to give a shout out to E4S because that organization, Entrepreneurs for Sustainability, really shaped a lot of who I am, and even in terms of like the books to read, like Cradle to Cradle and The Ecology of Commerce and Natural Capitalism, and just I don't know, good to even things like Good to Great, and it was just such an influential time, kind of in those mid 2000s, and in Cleveland, and being a part of a new story. To create a new story for Cleveland around sustainability and the rebirth of the Cuyahoga River and the rebirth of green industry and quote unquote green jobs. So what really propels me every day is what I call my 5 Ps. Of course, we know in sustainability we talk about people, planet, profit, but I like to talk about people, planet, prosperity, passion, and purpose. My 5 Ps. So I've worked in those 5 Ps in a variety of contexts. For in the foundation world, then in the recycling world, and then in sort of a consulting academic space at Case Western at the Fowler Center for Businesses and Agent of World Benefit at the Weatherhead School at Case, and then most recently for Covia, which was previously Fairmount Central, Fairmount Minerals, the largest producer of sand in North America. And then most recently for Norwegian Cruise Lines, based in Miami, Florida. So it's I've always been working in those 5 Ps, and it's those 5 Ps of finding a way to operate an organization or advance an organization closer toward operating in a way that really advances all 5 of those: people, planet, prosperity, passion, and purpose.
Mhm. Maybe in addition to those 5 Ps, Bo, do you have any examples you want to share on um, what worked well for you in moving sustainability and social impact forward?
Hmm. Definitely having supportive senior management is really critical, but I think connecting, no matter where you are, connecting with the interests and the passions of the people that you're around. And there's a great story of a nurse at University Hospitals. This is a great time in this COVID time to give a shout out to all our healthcare workers who are frontline heroes. But there's a great sustainability story about one nurse who started taking home non-confidential, so non-HIPAA, non-medical paper at university hospitals to recycle. She just started collecting it in a box, and Dr. Aparna Bowl could tell this story if you interview her, but it wasn't Dr. Bowl, but it was just a nurse that started taking home this paper, and the ripples that ultimately created, which led to a whole strategy, not only at university hospitals, but also at Cleveland Clinic and other places as well. But just to think that no matter where you are, what system you're in, whether you're in a complicated hospital system or a cruise company with 36,000 employees like me, or a smaller for-benefit organization, you can start making small changes like that and meeting people where they are. Maybe they're interested in local food, maybe they're interested in waste reduction, maybe they're interested in energy efficiency, maybe they're interested in saving money. So even just thinking about connecting with the passions and interests of those that are immediately around you, and then kind of translating your energy in a way that connects with their energy and passions to really move the needle forward.
Kind of like a small act of inspiration could create a larger sea change.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think some of the most successful kind of sustainability or social impact initiatives and companies have started from a small group of people who want to make a change, want to do something different, and kind of build momentum from there. And it's what is so important, what you mentioned, is support from senior management. That is what's going to make the real difference, is supporting people who are passionate about this, who want to do that work.
I would add, support from senior management, and then connecting. So maybe there's a sort of a trifecta: support from senior management, connecting with people around you with their passions and interests, but then also really making the business or organization case. And maybe that's a part of getting senior management's buy-in, but helping senior management understand and really see that, again, whether you're a small for-benefit organization or a large for-benefit nonprofit organization, or in the private sector, or even government, wherever you find yourself, whatever education, whatever sector you're in, really making the business case as to why sustainability is good for your business in terms of cost reduction, risk reduction, attracting, retaining, developing an electric engaged workforce, having positive stakeholder engagements with your supply chain, with customers. It really is just a good business decision, no matter what kind of organization you're in. But making sure that you make that business case clear, then you're going to have the senior management support if the business case is really made clear.
So I'm going to ask a hard question. So what about now, right? So many layoffs, so many changes in how business is operating. How do you see that impacting business now?
So, I've been reading a lot about these topics in forums like greenbiz.com. There's certainly been a lot of discussions about it, but I think in some ways it's going to continue to advance, I guess I'd say, a positive pressure to make the business case, right? So things like any kind of real bottom line savings that you can deliver to your organization right now is even more important. So whether that's in energy, waste, water, even higher retention. So yes, there's been layoffs, but we know when people walk out the door, whether it's even a furlough or a layoff, that there's value lost to the company, particularly if it's a layoff. But we also know that an engaged workforce is more likely to stay. So let's spin that, and what's the positive value of higher retention rates? We know that's real. When someone walks out the door, it's something like between 50% and 200% of their salary, kind of based on the level they were at, that in lost value to the organization. So in these difficult times, I think really making the business case even more um, is particularly critical. But I also think that expectations continue to rise, particularly for corporations. I mean, look at, we have, it seems like we now do have, thankfully, enough ventilators in this country, but the government and the federal government did have to sort of formally ask certain manufacturers to make ventilators, right? So what is the role of the private sector now? You have, figures like Bill Gates really stepping up, not in his role at foundation, but, in his, with his Microsoft capacity as well, stepping up to kind of offer insights and really be a part of the solution. But I think that we have to look to business in these times as an agent of world benefit and as a part of the solution in these difficult times.
Yeah, thank you. Daniel, do you have a question, or could I ask the
Yeah.
next one?
No, go ahead, Victoria.
Oh, I'm just curious about if you see any big changes or small changes in your work, in your line of work, in the next 6 months to a year.
Well, in terms of sustainability in general, or at Norwegian Cruise Line, or both?
Both, yeah.
I certainly think continuing to make the business case is really critical. I don't want to speculate or comment on how things will maybe change in the cruise industry, but I think you can imagine there's going to be, things we've already said publicly, like increased health protocols for guests getting on ships, increased safety and health protocols for sure. But I also think that there's continued rising, at least in our world, customer expectation for sustainability performance. So for example, one of the things that Norwegian is really proud of recently is that in all three of our brands, so we have Norwegian, Oceania, and Regent Cruises, we just recently got rid of all plastic water bottles, which will combined eliminate something like 11 million water bottles per year across all three brands, which we think is a huge win and a win for the environment. And what we're finding too is that guests, before we had to temporarily suspend operations, guests were also engaging with it. We also eliminated, it might seem small, but we eliminated plastic straws, and I forget how many millions of plastic straws, but multiple millions of plastic straws, which means, those won't get blown overboard into the ocean, and that won't impact wildlife. So a lot of positive things. But I think what's changing, not just in our world, but in general, is sort of customer and consumer engagement with sustainability topics. And that means not only on the sort of environmental performance side, but on the social side. So what does your brand stand for? What is your company doing on energy, wastewater? But also, how do you treat your employees? How do you treat your employees now, especially? How do you take care of the communities where you operate? How do you treat your suppliers? So I think the expectations are going up in terms of how corporate citizens and all organizations kind of perform
Yeah,
in all
absolutely.
these broad topics.
Yeah, and we talk to friends and colleagues and people, especially the younger millennial generation, when they're looking for jobs, they're looking for companies where they can make a difference, and they know that company's making a difference. So they're researching companies, they're going to their sustainability page, their community page, what is that company doing? And in interviewing, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see, after this pandemic's over, if people are interviewing, asking companies, what difference did you make to your stakeholders during this time? And I think that's really important. So thank you for bringing that up. And, we've been talking recently too about making that business case for sustainability and social impact after this is over, and hoping businesses are going to see that value still, because there is a lot of value, and potentially see it even clearer after this is over. Victoria, I don't know if you want to comment on that too.
I think we're kind of confirming that this is the trend. I think the question is who's gonna jump on it and follow it and really take it to heart. Oh, sorry, can you hear me? This is better?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's the question, right? Are there enough resources for the companies to know what to do next, right? What steps could they take next if they haven't already engaged their employees and suppliers and communities?
Yeah, and we're thinking about how we can be more creative in that space for companies and innovative, and what new challenges can we see and solve in that space for companies that will benefit them in the near term and even more so in the long term after this. So there's some excitement around that, I think, is trying to see these new challenges and how companies can reduce their impact. And one thing we've talked about is a lot of companies are reducing their carbon impact right now because so many employees are not driving to work. And how can we keep some of those? How can we keep some of those initiatives and impacts after this?
Definitely, working from home is, I think we've shown, at least, it's difficult. Like in my previous employer, if you're operating a mine, you can't do that from home, right? If you're driving a forklift, you can't do that from home. If you're, providing service on a cruise ship, you can't do that from home. But certainly a lot of the administrative and, what do they call us? SG&A employees we know now can have more flexibility. So how is that going to change even office space? Can we just sort of have more flexible? Do we need less retail or less space for offices if people aren't coming in every day, if they're working from home more frequently? Just wanted to touch base on the recruiting aspect, but that's definitely something that both at Covia, the sand mining company, publicly traded based in Cleveland, and at Norwegian, that I have been in close touch with our human resources folks about, that this is these ESG, environmental, social governance, or sustainability, corporate responsibility topics are really on the hearts and minds of sort of the emerging workforce. And they're getting asked lots of questions. Recruiters are getting asked questions. Our HR people, they're asking, and it's not just people applying for roles in ESG or sustainability, it's people applying for roles in sales and finance and accounting, and IT and HR that want to know, what is the organization doing in these, to advance these topics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because everybody wants to work for a resilient company, right?
And one they can feel good about too, right? So it's like, it gets back to the 5 Ps of people, planet, prosperity, passion, and purpose. Like, we spend a third of our life or more working. So you want to feel good about what you're doing. Like, you're helping to, make the world a better place and truly, do good and do well at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that we are going to see employees continue to push their companies after this to keep some of those kind of those positive impacts going. We talked about how some companies were able to quickly pivot their, not necessarily the business model, but their focus for the time being, to help the community, to provide a product, to provide a service, and companies showed us that they can do that. They're capable of doing that. And I think employees are going to try to push to keep some of those positive impacts, whether it's just, making hand sanitizer or PPE, or providing, food for food banks or kids in need. And how can we keep that going?
Absolutely. I think, there's, I've just seen a lot of sort of people commenting even in social media about how, like, it seems like there's something new that's trying to be born here. And maybe it's a more gentle capitalism or a way of treating each other. But again, I think expectations are really rising, and not just for B2C, but for B2B businesses as well. And certainly we're seeing that from an investor standpoint. Larry Fink, who heads BlackRock, which has, I think, the largest sort of investment firm with trillions and trillions of assets under management. He said in his annual letter published earlier this year in 2020 that, corporations that aren't meaningfully trying to advance their ESG or sustainability performance, they will divest from them. BlackRock will not invest in companies that aren't taking this seriously. And that means not just saying they're doing something, but actually like reporting through one of the main frameworks, so whether that be GRI or SASB or UN Global Compact, TCFD, one of those sort of 4 or 5 main sustainability reporting frameworks to show how their organization is actually meaningfully identifying, first of all, the topics that matter most. We call that materiality. Really doing a formal materiality process to understand what are the ESG or sustainability topics that matter most, and then how are we really managing those topics.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for Larry Fink to say that, it's like, I mean, I didn't give him a 20 or a 20,000, but that's music to my ears when I hear, major investors saying, we are asking companies to do better and to disclose what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. So, Bo, before this all happened, what were some kind of things that were giving you hope in your work? Maybe in the sustainability field generally. Was there any kind of new emerging ideas or a shift that you have seen kind of in the sustainability field?
I guess I would go back to that investor comment that this is not something that is sort of being pushed. This is being pushed at the grassroots level and from generations that care more and increasingly about these topics, but that it's also being pushed from through shareholder resolutions at Exxon, from activist investors, from investors, divesting of certain types of companies like fossil fuels, et cetera. So that's exciting to me and definitely gives me hope because it says that this is really serious. Also, I think the sort of generational wealth transfer that's going to happen as baby boomers retire and and move on, that the trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars globally that will be transferred down to generations that are frankly more interested and care more about these topics. Like it's not going to be business as usual from an investment perspective. So that's definitely one of kind of the mega trends is investor pressure. Again, I think, but still making the business case for it. And I think, certainly ultimately, I'm not seeing this as a trend yet, but ultimately I'd like to see that organizations don't need an ESG or sustainability department, right? That it's just everyone sees it as part of their jobs and that everyone integrates ESG in everything they do. But until then, we certainly are seeing a robust job market of sustainability professionals and consultants as well that are helping companies and nonprofits and educational institutions. We're seeing, even an example at like Case Western Reserve University, they have a director of sustainability, Stephanie Corbett, who's maybe and also a former E4S employee like Victoria, maybe someone you want to consider interviewing. But I mean, from universities to organizations like, the foundation world, to the small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large businesses, they're all increasingly taking this more and more seriously. Mm-hmm. And so that's encouraging to me. I think the demand for good reporting is also another mega trend. So the investor pressure, businesses taking more seriously, all organizations taking more seriously, and the demand for good data and really science-based targets is something else too. So not just saying like, well, here's how much, energy we consumed in the last year, but, here's how we're measuring it. Here's our 5, 10, 15, 20-year goal to reduce it. Here's what we're doing to reduce our energy use each year. And what we can't reduce outright, we're going to consider buying carbon offsets. You're seeing that's another mega trend I'm seeing that's really exciting, is the purchase of carbon credits. And yeah, in some ways you could say it's sort of get out of jail free, but it's better than not doing it as long as the projects are verified, and there's sort of different standards that verify them. But it's fantastic if you can't yet fully get your emissions down to zero, which very, very few organizations can, but to then purchase offsets. And it could be like a clean cook stove project in East Africa, or a mangrove restoration project in Myanmar, or a forest conservation project in Brazil, or a wind or solar farm in India or China or the Philippines. That's definitely another trend that I'm encouraged by, excited by as well.
Mm-hmm. And we talked mentioned earlier about how employees are going to be looking for companies who are making a difference. Consumers are as well. When we talk about reporting, consumers are looking to companies that they want to support. They're going to their websites looking for their sustainability reports. What are they reporting? So I think it's on the investor side it's very important, and on the consumer side it's a very much a growing importance as well.
And not even just in your reporting, but in your very products, right? So like I can be interested in GM, and they do an incredible job in their sustainability report. They actually use like all 4 or 5 main frameworks and they kind of cross-reference them, very sophisticated. And I bet they have a team of 20 people full-time helping to do that. But I'm not only interested in how good their reporting is and what percentage of their products are recycled content and where they come from, but also what do they produce? Like what are their electric cars like? They phased out the Volt, they've introduced the Bolt, but what else are they doing in terms of electric cars or hybrid cars that get better gas mileage? I know, unfortunately, there's been a trend recently we've seen in a lot of automakers to moving back toward SUVs and trucks because that was higher margin selling and gas was cheaper, but that, of course, has environmental implications. So it's not just the quality of the reporting, it's the quality of the products as well. And I think consumers are really demanding more. You see it in the food we eat, people asking questions about where is it from, what's in it, what, is it GMO or, was it free range if you eat meat products, or, how many, are there more than 5 ingredients in it? How did it come from the average plate mile calorie we know comes from 1,500 miles away? Is any of it local, et cetera?
That's a great point.
I want to shift to a couple of specific questions that we want to ask you. We're hoping to ask all the guests these questions and then share the answers in the show notes. So what is your favorite sustainability or social impact book or resource these days?
Wow. In terms of book, I would probably go to Natural Capitalism or Embedded Sustainability by Chris Laszlo and Nadia Zexon-Bayeba. Also, there's a wonderful book called Flourishing Enterprise that was actually produced by a bunch of fellows at Weatherhead. And it's basically about creating a flourishing self, which creates a flourishing organization, which then creates a flourishing world. So it's about kind of self-care in some ways, and how can you cultivate caring in people and in yourself that really nourishes you, that will then make you a better teammate in your organization, whatever kind of organization you're in, and that will ultimately create a flourishing world. So Flourishing Enterprise was really fantastic. I actually just picked this back up, Presence, by Peter Senge, Otto Scharmer, really fantastic works. There's so many good ones. Cradle to Cradle too continues to inspire me. And then there was another one, Cradle to Cradle, there was sort of a version 2.0. I'm blanking on the title, but that was also really great. The Upcycle. Yep. Yeah. I read that too by Bill McDonough, just thinking about, design is really the first signal of human intention, right? So when we're designing products or services, in the case of products, are we designing them for their next life? And are the raw materials going to go into either the biological nutrient cycle, like something that can be composted back into the soil, or is it going to go into a technical nutrient cycle, something that could be recycled and reused? So many: Embedded Sustainability, The Flourishing Enterprise, Cradle to Cradle, The Upcycle, Presence. And then, just as yeah, some of the classics, some more recent than others, but also I would say, reading kind of blogs and resources like GreenBiz, it's really, if you're in the corporate sector, like it really is useful, even for trends in reporting, trends in the field, trends in like where the best place for sustainability employees to sit in an organization. Like, should you be in supply chain? Should you be in finance? Should you be in legal? I actually saw a really interesting webinar the other day, kind of exploring the pros and cons of different structure to put your ESG people, employees. But GreenBiz is a really fantastic resource as well.
Yeah, love Joe and the empire he built. It's great.
Incredible. And the conference itself, if you ever have the chance to go, I've been 3 times. Green Biz, it's typically in February in Phoenix, which by the way is a nice time to be in Phoenix.
It is.
Um, and it's not a lot of water there, but so they have some issues. But anyway, it's just inspiring to kind of be re-inspired by even kind of what you're trying to do here on a micro level, like reconnecting those of us who are in this space and sustainability to kind of nourish each other and inspire each other to keep going.
Mhm. That leads me to the next question. So what do you do for self-care? And if you're not a fan of
Mm.
that word, what do you do to kind of keep you going? What do you do to restore yourself? Maybe that's a better word.
I think that's probably the most important question you've asked so far today. And so I do have a meditation technique that I do every day called Transcendental Meditation. I just started that in 2018. That's about 20 minutes in the morning. I'm very consistent in the morning. I'm less consistent in the afternoon. I tend to exercise more in the afternoon, meditate in the morning, exercise in the evening. But so meditation, prayer also too, for me is a wonderful thing. So no matter what your faith tradition is, you just encourage people to deepen it and explore it, or explore something that works for you. Also, time in nature. A dear friend and mentor of mine, Jackie Stevenson, who I think many of you listening to this, or certainly Victoria, I know you know, talks about ecological identity. Like, where are the places that are special to you? If you're in Cleveland, it could be Edgewater Park. It could be the Cleveland Nature Front Preserve at the north end of Martin Luther King. It could be somewhere in the Emerald Necklace. It could be a little pocket park, Victoria, like the one 3 doors down from you. That's so cool in Cleveland Heights. I love that, with like the stumps to sit on and the flowers. And it could be, growing some of your own food. So for me, it's meditation, prayer life, and my faith community, and then also just really time in nature. And for me, I'm a big gardener. So that was one of the hardest things leaving Cleveland. I had an acre up here in Cleveland, and just was really rooted in the ground. So I now have 25 houseplants, which I love. And they're with me in South Florida. And they're actually very happy in South Florida because they're tropical. And they're like, we've made it. We've arrived, because they're in the tropics now. So they no longer have frost. But so meditation, prayer, time in nature. And, I'd also say, good friends too, and community is really important. Parents, a dog is great. I don't have one, but I have access to dogs, so that's awesome. All of the above.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
And that goes back to Flourishing Enterprise, that book that came out of Weatherhead, because if we're not taking care of I'll phrase it appreciatively, we need to take care of ourselves. So again, so that we can flourish ourselves, we can create a flourishing organization, flourishing relationships with the people closest to us, and ultimately a flourishing world.
So the third one is, who inspires you?
Oh my gosh. Living, passed on. I any of the above. There's so many people. I mean, in terms of like the Cleveland sustainability people, I think about folks like Holly Harlan. I think about you, Victoria. I think about Stephanie Corbett. I think about David Beach. These really sort of giants in Cleveland. I'd lift up Holly and David especially as some of the people who really inspired me and my career. Frankly, Ron Richard of the Cleveland Foundation, another one. But also, I'd say it's just some of my friends too. Even a very close friend of mine who unfortunately passed away. But just like sort of the legacy of his life and others. My grandparents too. I think about my grandparents every day. I just kind of remember them. I was lucky enough to have 6 grandparents because I had some step grandparents too. So, I think about the people who've really gone before and built, enabled us to do what we can do now.
Anything else you want to share or leave us with?
I just want to say thank you. And I think this is a really exciting project, and it's just good to be connected, to know both of you, and to be working together to create a flourishing world. And take care of yourself. But I want end with take care. It would end with be well. In the appreciative sense, go forth and keep doing all this good.
Oh, thank you. This conversation has been really great. Thank you for being our first conversation for Venture Forward Together. And thanks for sharing the 5 Ps. I think that was certainly a highlight of the conversation. So we really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon. Be well.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.